Welcome, everybody, to another episode in our series for Mastermind Leaders called Maximize Your Mastermind. I'm your host, Sebastian Cruz, and I'm the founder of True Freedom, the mastermind group for mastermind leaders. And today we have a very special guest, Sage Polaris, who is actually making her second appearance on the podcast and the first person to make the second appearance. So the first episode was phenomenal. It was about conversational copywriting. Definitely recommend checking that out. But for today, we're going to go into conscious launches for your coaching program, for your course, for your community, for your mastermind group. And why is that important? It's being important because if you have something near and dear on your heart that you know you're here to give out to the world, if you have a mission that's calling you to step forward, then this is the perfect thing. Because if we don't do things with the appropriate method, what happens? We get heartbroken, we get jaded, we feel judged, we feel like it's a failure, and we feel like we're not doing our important work here in the world. So that's what Sage is going to be sharing with us today. And before I turn it on over, Sage has written high converting copy for more than 525 projects. So it's not her first rodeo, her second rodeo, or even her third. You could say it's maybe her 525th rodeo. And she's worked with high profile clients such as Teachable, Chalene Johnson, and maybe you've recognized Lynn Twist from The Soul of Money, very popular book. And she helps many coaches and community leaders and mastermind leaders as well. And her clients have made upwards of over $125 million in a single launch, $1 million launch. So with all of that being said, welcome, Sage, to the show. And how are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Sebastian. I'm feeling super honored that I get to be a repeat guest. It feels special to be here, and I always appreciate you opening up your community and allowing me to support them.
Absolutely. Yes. People told me they absolutely loved your episode. And so we're going to keep the momentum flowing. So yeah, let's start with always, the story and the mission of how you got into this. And perhaps maybe we could have a extra nuance this time of, in particular with launches, because conversational copywriting, I imagine, could be, non-launching.
Mhm.
And it also can be like, okay, we're gearing up, we have so many spots, or we have, a program or a cohort that's about to start. Could you share a bit about how, even within the world of conversational copywriting, you found your experience in launching?
Yeah, 100%. So I loved in the beginning of my business, 12 years ago, started out working with clients mostly on website copy. So they're like, I need a home page and an about page and a services page if they were a service provider. And I was having so much fun with really bringing out people's brand personality and figuring out like what's unique to them and how like their unique mission in the world and how we could craft words around that so people would be excited about their brand. And then I learned about the launch space. So I started getting more into like online education. And I think for most people, if you're in the online space long enough, it's kind of unavoidable. You will learn about how people are selling courses or programs. And same with me. Like I heard about it and I was like, ooh, I love this space. And what got me excited is that learning the details of the data that comes behind launches, that's kind of what pulled me in is like, okay, you have an opt-in page. How many people who land on that page actually put in their name and email and like finish the opt-in that you're asking them to do? And so it took me back to like being in school and learning statistics. I hated algebra, I hated geometry, I hated calculus. I loved my stats class. It was so fun for me to learn. And so knowing that statistics play a big part in the launch world just like lit me up like no other. I felt like a kid again. I was like, this is amazing. But also what's cool is like behind the numbers, because in marketing, we use a lot of terms like leads and, we're tracking data on sales and like how many people convert to buy and all those things. But what I love about it is it's really about building connection with people, like actual people behind their screens. So as much as, I love the data and that nerdy side of it, I also feel like it's a way to more deeply connect with people. And that part also fascinates me that like I can be here in LA, you're in Phoenix, someone across the world is
Mm.
getting our message and is taking these next steps to get to know us more deeply in the online space. I think it's amazing. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about how incredible it is that we get to do what we do and connect with people at a level that we've never been able to previously, like previous generations. So that's what got me into this is like the data pulled me in and I was like, I want to learn about how making deeper connections through these funnels, right? Like having someone opt into something free and then making an offer to them shortly after that. And the only other thing I'll say about launching, so it's an interesting thing because I came in during a time when there's kind of the old guard of copywriters who learned launches and there was like a very specific way to do it. And we learned over time as people adapted and went through more launches that you don't have to follow the same rules that like the old guard was teaching us. There were new ways to show up, new tools that existed that didn't exist before. So I'm very much, I feel like I am a millennial and I feel like very much a millennial in the online launch space as well. Like there's new ways and exciting things that we can do that didn't even exist like 5 years ago. So those are the things that are kind of exciting me about launches and how I got into that world.
Oh, fantastic. I have so many questions, and that absolutely resonates because, yeah, seeing the connection behind the clicks, the connection
Mhm.
behind the screen, really love
Mhm.
that because, yeah, I started off in the internet marketing world. So that's where I grew up. And I would say I was a bro marketer, like many for a time. And so the old styles of launches, yeah, absolutely. Product launch formula, Frank Kern, like John Reese, like these, OG launches in a day. And so, yeah, that's always something I'm mindful of with, marketing and getting a message
Mhm.
out is it's so easy to lose the connection
Yeah.
and not realize, okay, there's a soul behind every click. There's a person behind every click. They have dreams, desires, family, most likely, people around them, right? And so I like that connected thread that you have there.
Yeah, that's beautiful that you shared that. And we needed those bro marketing strategies in the beginning. And then I think people like got smart and wise to it and was like, okay, this is false urgency that they're creating, saying, for example, that
Mhm.
a timer says that the offer won't be available in the next 30 minutes. You have to buy in the 30 minutes, and there's a timer at the top of the page. And then it just recognizes your IP address. But if you signed up on a different IP, it would give you another 30 minutes to buy. So
Yeah.
those are the things that we get to discern for ourselves what we're okay with in our business.
Hmm.
I don't want to make anybody right or wrong per se, but for me, that wouldn't sit well with me. I wouldn't do a false urgency offer like that in my business. And if it works for someone else and they feel right about it, then they should go ahead and do that. Everybody gets to, I think that's when we're talking about conscious launch strategies.
Hmm.
The whole point of that is not to make one person right and the other person wrong. It's to discern for yourself how you want to show up in your business. Because at the end of the day, if you have a big mission, you have to be aligned with how you're going to market that mission. And so that's the conversation that I'm excited to have today.
Mm, absolutely. Me too. Yeah. And something that I share in my work is it's basically like, if it's not true, don't do it. If it's not true, don't
Mm,
say it. Because it's like,
mm-hmm,
especially in the mission driven space, right? It's like if we're
mm-hmm.
lying to customers, audience, clients at any time, like I believe it defeats the purpose of, bringing people together with respect and being part of a team. So yeah, that would be my feeling is because those things have come up, right? Because it's like, should a person, say there's only so many spots left or not say there's so many spots? It's like, if it's true, say it. If it's not, don't, is my belief. So,
Yeah, and I get excited too because I think that there are opportunities to create natural urgency that feels, like you said, true to you. So like if a program has a start date or a bonus has a specific date it has to be delivered, then you're truly saying like, this is happening on this date and I need you to sign up before then because I'm onboarding everybody and this is when it's taking place. So I think finding those nuances for what works for you and your business is really exciting. And I did want to mention one that sticks out the most to me whenever I'm working with people who are very mission driven, and want to take a conscious approach to doing better when it comes to their marketing, is that we think, or we were taught, like, for example, on a sales page or in a sales email, that we have to push with pain, right? Like that's something that in our copy we're told, like agitate the problem and then tell them the solution. But what I love and that I've learned working with a lot of folks, like you mentioned earlier, Lynn Twist is one of my clients. I'm getting ready to work with the Agape Spiritual Center, and I was having a conversation with them too. So Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith about how, and he says this, it's so funny because I quoted it and I didn't know he was the one who said it. So he says that roughly that like you can pull with a vision rather than pushing with pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I had mentioned that on the call. I was like, yeah, like we don't have to push with pain. We can pull, it's just as strong and powerful in your copy to pull someone in with a specific vision of what they want, or what they aspire to, rather than, like, for me being an empath and a highly sensitive person, if you push me with pain, I feel it physically. I don't like to read that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like that's even just a baseline conversation we can have, is like you don't have to do that anymore, and it's not like a requirement of marketing yourself. And so I think that gives people permission in the conscious space to be like, oh, finally I can do something that feels good to me and know that it's proven to work.
Mm. Absolutely. And that's so cool to hear about Mr. Beckwith.
Yes.
Yeah, that brings me back to first hearing and reading The Secret for the first time. And wow, that's really special.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and it brings to mind something that I believe as well, which is I believe lying is a skill
Mhm.
because like people can get better and better at lying, right? I believe telling the truth is a skill as well because like we can get better and better at bringing up the tough thing that needs to be said or saying it in a smooth way that's able to connect with people. And that's
Mhm.
what comes to mind as well as like the art and the science, the nuances of like, okay, urgency and scarcity is a powerful thing for human beings, right? So
Mhm.
how can we have that where it's totally true? Like you had mentioned, like maybe there truly are a certain amount of spots, and maybe the cohort does start at that date. And so, yeah, I just wanted to really highlight that because what I find is as people go into marketing, there's the old way that's trying to pull them away. And it's like, oh, well, there's no other way. Like there is. And I believe in the next coming years and even decades, people will be like, oh, wow, like this is exactly how you use urgency, scarcity, and truth. Here's how you don't. But just right now, it's almost like it's an innovation is happening, perhaps.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, people are waking up. They're more aware. They've seen things before, if especially like if you are not brand new to the online space, you're like, I've seen this language before. I see everybody use it. But I think the important question to ask yourself is, does this work for me? Is this how I want to present myself? Rather than, oh, I saw so and so do it. I look up to that person and therefore I have to do it too, right? Like don't make that assumption. Instead, take a beat and take a pause, take a breath and be like, is this how I want to show up? Is this going to work best for my audience? A perfect example of that, I see a lot of people in my industry. I was just talking to a friend about this on Boxer. They tend to sell their group program. And then at the end, if they don't fill all the spots that they wanted to fill, they offer another extended payment plan, even though they said like the cart closed. It's like, oh, actually, we're going to offer an additional extended payment plan. If you were worried about money, you can come in and pay us a lower price point to get started. I do it the opposite. I flip that strategy. So I have my group program right now. It's to craft, market, and fill your VIP days. And I have a 45-day open cart window, which for most people are like, wait, what? That's so long.
Interesting.
And I literally take a vacation in the middle of that. I just got back from taking 2 weeks off. So I do that because it's easier for me to have more time to follow up with people who are interested in joining. But the first, up until the July 31st, so we just finished July, there was an extended payment plan at the beginning. So I told them you can join for 4 payments now until the end of this month, or it goes to 3 payments after that.
Hmm.
And I found that giving them a lot of time works better in the summer because so many people are in between vacations. So that's why I do a longer open cart period. And I had tested this last year.
Mhm.
And then I've also found that that extended payment plan at the beginning really gets people to make the decision early on.
Hmm.
And then they have a bonus that they can use right away prior to the program starting in August.
Hmm.
So, and it's not until August 21st. So some of them are joining a whole month in advance before the program starts. And they're fine with it and they love it and they're grateful. And as long as so I'm basically like reversing what most people do and giving
Hmm.
them the option up front rather than on the back end. And it works really well. And some people are fine with joining a little bit later and doing fewer payments, but it's still the same price. It's just fewer payments. So
Hmm. Hmm.
something to think about.
Right. So it's the same price, just split up different.
Yeah.
Right.
So they can
And you start
do
out with the
four
lower
payments
first.
of 600 or 3 payments of 800. Same
Hmm.
price.
Okay.
So I highly recommend, again, like being conscious of what's going on with your audience, right? Like I know that a lot of people are on summer break. I'm on summer break. And I'm on vacation during that open cart period. So just pre-planning all of that and giving them specific deadlines, they really appreciate it and it gives them plenty of time to make a decision.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Super cool. Okay. So I wonder, and this is a question for you of guiding the next step of the conversation here. I wonder, I feel like there's techniques and strategies that are, very precise and great. And then there's also perhaps the inner game of a person being like, oh, I'm going to be seen in a bigger way. Do you encounter, um, starting with the inner first? Because I feel like maybe if that's not fully open, maybe the ears won't fully open to people for the techniques. So, do you encounter things with the inner work of a person, basically at that level of being fearful of being seen on that new level, being fearful of being judged, perhaps on or perceived judgments on that level? Um, yeah, if you could just share that inner journey, what comes up for your clients and your work.
Yeah, first, my heart goes out to everyone who has chosen this path to decide to do a launch, to offer a group program. It's not for the faint of heart. This is
Mm,
very intense, especially like if you're going into your first launch, everything seems louder and more in your face
mm,
and more intense. Like that is part of the process. It's a natural rite of passage. Just know that that intensity um, will get less over time, but that first time you do got to rip off the band-aid and it is intense. You're like, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? It's the most exhilarating, thrilling, and difficult ride that you've chosen to get on
mm,
in your business because all of it all feels very personal. It's funny because we call ourselves personal brands, right?
mhm,
So it all feels very personal. It's a whole
mm.
different ball game than when I used to. So I worked for a company in college, and for 7 years, I was averaging 150 cold calls a day.
Wow. Wow.
But I was representing someone else, right?
Right.
So I was picking up the phone and selling for someone else. And it's so much easier than when you make that switch to selling for yourself. Oh my goodness. It's like a whole different experience. It's almost like I was two different people. So when you make that choice, it's no small thing. So I want to congratulate you for even making that choice to put your neck out there and to try something for yourself. Now, that being said, when you are getting ready to be seen in a bigger way, we often definitely there are stories that come up, right? Like, is it going to feel good to be out there in this way? Are people going to have something to say? I think a lot of people are like, I'm just going to put my offer out there and then run away and hide under my desk.
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like you say something once and then you're like, okay, I'm done. That was fun. Goodbye.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very common. So I just want to point that out. Like if that's the feeling that you're getting. And I would say that when you're getting ready to put your offer out there, we sometimes are worried and we make up these stories about external haters, like people who are
Mm.
going to have something negative to say if we post on social about our offer. And there, to this day, there's a little conversation that I have to have with myself
Oh, I love it.
whenever I post about things.
Okay.
Um, a big one for me still to this day is posting about VIP days because it's a very brief post that I will put on social, and I still feel like, ugh, I don't want to say anything about this right now. People are either not going to respond, that's one of my fears, or they're going to have something negative to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell myself, first of all, that the first hater I need to look out for is internal, not external, because that's
Mm.
happening inside my head. And then right before I ask someone for something or I post about one of my offers, I will say, let no come from other places, not yourself. That is the thing that I remind myself of.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Wow. Can you say that again?
Yes, let no come from other places, not myself.
Hmm.
So it's okay if I get a no, but I can't stop myself before I do it. And that's often what I want to do. I want to stop myself and not put myself out there. And I just know that I'm getting in my own way. And that's how I remove that block. So it's that double negative that really helps me to realize like it's okay. I can do this.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to double click on this and just spend some time here because I believe I feel like this is the Tony Robbins quote of like 80% of the success is like the inner game. He says
Hmm.
mindset, I would say, inner game, and then the 20% is like the technique, the tactics. Because I feel like this is just going, bumping up on so many things in our human nature that is like thousands of years old. Because that is
Hmm.
fear of death. Fear of death, how? Being kicked off the island. I remember growing up watching Survivor with my grandparents, and that was the game. Like if you didn't play the game, your light, your torch that was there, they'd have a little thing, and like, the tribe has spoken. You're voted off. Your flame is extinguished. You're done. So I feel like this is so powerful and deep here because I feel like that tribal, like, hey, don't be seen invisible and don't get kicked out of the group,
Hmm.
starts getting activated for all of us. So yeah, let no come from other places than myself.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's perfect for mission driven coaches, mission driven mastermind leaders, because it's like if we didn't have a mission, we probably wouldn't be doing anything at all, right? We wouldn't like be posting anything else. We can just live off referrals and different things and like it'll be fine, right? But what
Hmm.
does the mission require? Does the mission require us to step up, be bigger, be stronger, be more, have an impact? So I feel
Yeah.
like that, push pull of like the mission needs us, but the fear is there. So I love how you're speaking to transcend that.
Yeah, it's such a important conversation to have internally first, and then it allows you to remove blocks and show up in the way that you want to. And there's another piece too with, launching that happens, which is we're afraid of failure, which is totally valid. There's plenty of offers I put out there that didn't fly. I've tried so many things,
Mm-hmm.
especially I want to point to this change with inflation. The year that that hit, some people it hit them right away and they saw like, oh, I can't make offers in the way that I was before.
Mm-hmm.
And for some of my friends, it lagged. This year, it finally caught up to them where they're like, my market is not buying the way that they were.
Mm-hmm.
So my response to that was the year that it started, there were definitely group programs that I couldn't sell anymore. They weren't specific enough, they were too broad, and people wouldn't buy. That happened across the market. It was I that I was not special in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did that year and what I told my friend who was going through that, and if this is happening to anyone who's listening, my heart goes out to you. It's a lot to process because everything that worked in your business suddenly stops working, is to say that start putting offers out there. Do not stop yourself and keep trying things until you find what works again.
Mm,
What I learned, and I hope that you can take this nugget and use it in your own business, is that I couldn't do broad group programs anymore that were overall about business and marketing. I had to get super specific. And that's when I started offering my VIP day group program.
mm,
It was something that had already existed as a different program, but when I added that I was teaching them one skill that they could easily see would increase their revenue and create more white space on their calendar, they were in. So I realized, like, oh, they need one specific skill that's obvious to them. If I try to say, like, I can teach you so many other things too, they couldn't get their head wrapped around that, because I think what happened internally is that people were so afraid to make decisions that if it was at all confusing to them or too broad for them, they just would say no immediately. They were like, unless, I think there were some exceptions to that. If you had enough brand notoriety, you could kind of get away with things still
mhm,
because your name prestige precedes you. And I'm happy that some people could continue to do that. But for people who are in the middle of the market where their prestige did not precede them and they were still building their brand authority, if you want to use that word, or what, however you want to describe the idea of being a recognized name in your industry, those got hit the hardest. And I saw it across my industry. And it was really fascinating and heartbreaking to watch. And I was caught in that too. And so the solution was be okay with a failed launch, but keep going. And so that year that inflation really hit my business, I made so many different offers and I broke things out into smaller bite-sized chunks. So I was offering like a mastermind, and then I did a mini mind adventure day where I met up with people in London, New York, and LA. And that was so fun for me, but
sounds
that's all I
like a
could
lot of
say yes
fun.
to. Yeah, it was, but it's like one small thing that they could say yes to, right? So just to give people some context and figure out ways and a lot of my peers also with masterminds, they added a second tier to their offer where it was like you could join at this higher price or you could come in at a lower price.
Mm, mhm.
Yeah,
Wow.
so that was fascinating to watch, but it's a lot. It's a lot to process when you're helming the ship and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to pivot.
Mm. Wow, so much good stuff there that I totally resonate with. And so a few things to, highlight the specificity. I
Mhm.
love that you shared that because I've heard, I've been in marketing for like 13, 14 years. So, so people will come and say, "Oh, nobody's buying right now," or people don't buy that anymore. It's like, well, that's what I end up saying too, is specificity. And so it's like
Love
it
it.
just raises the level, raises the bar of,
Mhm.
okay, what are they going to get? When are they going to get it? How are they going to get it?
Mhm.
And if that would have been there before, it would have sold even better, I feel like. So it's just that almost like that visual of, I think it was like when the tide goes down, the ships, like you can kind of see everything in the shipyard.
Mhm.
Totally butchered that analogy, but it was basically like, you can, when there isn't as much cash flowing, then, things need to be more precise.
Yeah, yeah. And or pivot the market that you're selling to.
Mm,
And some of my clients had to do that as well. Like they stopped working with people who were early on in business and went to the
mm,
more advanced business owners. So it's fascinating to watch all this, but really too, like what I wanted to get to is that when you are afraid of failure in your business, sometimes that stops you from showing up a second or a third time to put your offer out there. And I think we have to be careful that we assume people don't want to buy anything. But the truth is, they want something from you. They're waiting for you to make the right offer. So that's for me with failure. Like I've learned to be more resilient around it because I just keep showing up and trying different things. I don't keep trying the same thing and expecting a different result, though. That is something to be careful about.
right. And I want to share one brief story since we talked about like, the different chapters of internet marketing.
Hmm.
Oh, geez, Dan Kennedy. I'll never forget reading a story, I think when I was like 19 or 20 in a PDF It was a story of basically feeling like at that stage people didn't have money to buy what he had
Hmm.
and whatever he was selling, and wasn't even like marketing or business. But he remembers talking to somebody who's just like, I don't have the money, I don't have the money, I don't have the money. And they had all these reasons and they were true, but then he saw them go buy a huge purchase of like a big screen TV or something. And it's like, okay, well, what if it's just the case that everybody has the money, it's just what we, spend it on.
Prioritize, yeah.
Right. And, of course, there's extremes. What do you call them? On any side of the spectrum, but it's just like, okay, generally speaking, people tend to, I believe, pay for what they deem as important. So I like
Yeah.
that of like, who's it the most important to? Specificity, what's most important to them? And what I find too is that a lot of times we, don't need to do everything. Like you mentioned, you pulled out one specific thing and then people wanted to buy that, other clients about one specific thing. So I almost feel like sometimes we feel like we have to be everything to everyone for them to buy. And really they just want that one thing that's clear, focused, and they can understand.
Yeah, right now. And I don't know if the market will stay that way. It'll be interesting to watch. And so I have noticed though, like what's working in terms of trends, is to be more fluid with your offers, offer payment plans if people need it. Um, and just be willing to be flexible in the way that you deliver things too. So as much as I love doing a VIP day with a client, for example, where it's like we batch our work in 3 or 6 hours and get it all done in one day, some clients aren't ready for that. And I'm like, it's okay. We can spread out our meetings and we can give you time to digest in between. That's really something that I've noticed, like being conscious of how overloaded someone might be, or not being at the right stage in business, or the product being new to their business, where they need more time to figure out what's going to work best for the messaging. They need to go on some walks and take some showers and like do all that brain processing in the background that needs to happen. But if somebody's got a very buttoned up business and time is their biggest factor, then of course they're going to want to do a VIP day instead. I know for me, in my business, I'd rather buy a VIP day from someone at this point because time is so important to me. And I think I've shared with you, I take 4 months off
Mm.
every year for the ninth year in a row. So if you can give me a faster delivery time in a shorter amount of time, I'm always going to take that option because I'm like, listen, I do not want to sit here and figure these things out. I want to be hanging out with my kids by the pool.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Question for you on personal brands and where it's at in the future of it. Do
Hmm.
you have any insights on there's a there's a group session earlier today that we're both part of.
Hmm.
And one of the quotes that came from that, and a person was being guided through a guided facilitation. It was Matthew Cook's program. I'll just say it right now because he was the last podcast episode. So, anyways, one of the things that came from the facilitation is a person saying social media, her personal brand, you know,
Hmm.
being the expression of her being.
Mm.
And like on one hand, maybe it just feels like really out there, but another, like I felt it. I felt it of like, oh, instead of like trying to do this, trying to that, it's like, here's what I believe, here's what I feel, here's what I recommend, here's what I'm curious about. And it's just being like almost like a window into who a person is. So then they can decide, like, are we a good fit to work together? Are we aligned, mission, vision, values? And the way I've been looking at it more and more these days is like, if this can help shorten the sales calls, shorten the sales process, simplify
Hmm.
it, because people are just like, oh, I already feel like I know you already, instead
Yeah.
of that needing to happen. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on personal branding, like the true core of it, as well as, yeah, maybe the future of it?
Okay, so I have a very different take on social in general, that I want to share a little bit of context to. I never had a social platform, Facebook, Instagram, any of that, until I had a business, because I always knew that like I only saw it as a tool,
Mm-hmm.
to grow my business and to connect with people, which I love. And I love that she's landed on like this being an expression of her being for sure. Um, I still to this day have I've kind of taken it one step further. I see the way that I connect people on social, I don't look a lot, I'll be honest, I don't look a lot at the insights. I'm not trying to like for me, I'm doing something different. I'm going for high engagement. I don't care about the views or the followers. And the people I engage with are mostly my peers. So I see it almost as like a spiritual tool, like the right persons will find me and connect with me, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
You can be much more strategic about it than I am, but that's the level I'm at with it. Now, the reason I say that is because my strongest marketing channel is email. And I think in terms of personal brands, I've seen people who fully make social be their main marketing channel where they make their money. I've seen people who mostly only use email to make that their main profit driver. So I don't want to say that the future of personal brands is only going to be on one platform or the other. But if you look at the data behind it, to me, it's much more obvious why I would prefer email. The open rates are higher. The reach of my message is higher always. Like I can get anywhere between 40% open rate to my whole list, upwards of 70%, depending on the segment. So that means that the majority of my audience is seeing my message. If I post on social, it's 2 to 3% on the feed.
Mhm.
So the math for me, it's like very obvious why I'm going to spend way more time cultivating an email community and less time on social. So I think that people need to discern that for themselves. People who go for a lot of views, along with engagement, I think that they are going to have to keep running on that mill. If you have the energy for that, and that's what you love to do, please do it.
Not me either.
So Sebastian knows himself too. It's like that's not it.
Yeah. All the projectors listening are like, yeah, not us either.
And that's it. So I think the future of personal brands, but also like everything that's worked for people up until this point, the people who get the most traction are always going to be people who go inwards first, understand their personality, and then create a brand based on it's not just like a hype word, personal brand. It's like truly, if you know yourself, then you know how to market yourself. What I guess what I know won't work in the future for people because I've seen them try it and it will continue to not work is being omnipresent because you see someone who is 20 chapters ahead of you in their business who is omnipresent and is leveraging every marketing channel to grow their business. But I'm pretty confident that they started on one channel and they did well there first. And they did it based on their personal strengths before they had a team. That's usually what works for people. They find one place that works and then slowly add other channels. And that's very much my personality, right? As much as I am a generator in human design and I can do things all the time, uh, I need that downtime in between. And social just doesn't work with my personal algorithm, my internal algorithm. We are not clicked in that way. Um, so I'm just going to continue to grow my email list because it happens on my time. And that's what works for me. So I think for other people who are considering, if you're new in the game, find something that gives you joy. Where do
Mm,
you enjoy showing up? Just start there. And it might be a referral based only business, and you never get to the email marketing and you never get to the social. And that's totally fine if you're someone who's high on connection points and you love connecting with others on an individual basis. I know we are in love with the idea of scaling everything, but there are ways to scale referral connections that just don't get talked about because instead
mm,
we talk about, again, like
mm,
making unconscious choices of just like, I'm going to chase this platform and that platform because someone I admire does it.
mhm,
And so I really ask people to think about like what gives you joy, go there first. And then later you can add those other things. But to turn off that piece of your mind that's telling you you're missing out by not using all the other tools available to you is the hardest part. of being in the online space. It is so tricky to be able to discern. And over time, your discernment will get refined. And you'll be like, oh, I'm so happy that my peers can put money into Facebook ads. I'm watching them do it right now, and they get all the sales they want from it. And I'm so happy that that works for them. I personally prefer connection. So I love meeting affiliate partners, and I don't ever need to run ads if I don't want to again. I've definitely tested it in my business, and discern like what that is for you. So for a long time, I'll give you a percentage because sometimes it helps people to think about this.
Yeah.
For a long time, I was 75% organic traffic and 25% paid ads.
Mm.
And that formula worked for me for a while. And then I decided once I saw the power of affiliate partners that I could replace the ads with partners. And I enjoy it so much more. I love talking to people. I love supporting them in the way that they support me. I'd rather give my money to a peer who promoted me, or I promoted them and they send me some money, than give it to Zuckerberg, to be honest.
That's exactly what I say too.
Oh, I love
Like
that.
literally
Yes.
verbatim.
Oh my God. It's so
Yeah.
funny. Sebastian, you and I are like definitely twin flames. We've talked about other things where we're just like, yep, this is me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's, I think, if you want to be in this business for decades to come, which I have been, then I highly recommend you go internal and figure out what gives you joy. And then just watch the numbers. Don't forget to track the data and historically look back and say what's working. Because if you're watching other people, they're often testing things. They might be on YouTube right now, but they may not stay there because they're looking at the data and being like, oh, we tried that, it didn't work. But you just assume it's working for them because you see them there. So keep all of that like in the background of your mind when you're looking at things out in the wild west of the internet.
That's what it is. The Wild West, and everybody's got a shiny thing that they're selling. That's the best thing since sliced bread.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're all really good. I mean, I love marketers. We know how to hype it up, especially in the US. We know how to put some hype into pretty much everything, but
Mhm.
you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. Wow. So I'm just marinating that because I feel like there's so many powerful concepts there that I like to highlight. Um, using one thing that really resonated with me is that I feel like you put words to that I was feeling, but I didn't have words for yet.
Hmm.
Is using social media for as a spiritual tool
Hmm.
for speaking to your soul allies. Or,
Hmm.
you know, I even thought like ideal clients, but it's like, no, just speak to the soul allies. That's what resonates with me. Yeah.
Ah, that's such a good phrase. I love it. I'm definitely quoting you on that.
Nice. Spiritual tool. Yeah, because I feel like that takes off the pressure. And something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is the difference between lead generation and lead nurture.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, when I've tried to use social for lead generation, there's a
Hmm.
pressure. There's a like, oh, I need to make a call to action and get something from every post because this is the only way to generate leads, right? In
Hmm.
terms of like referrals being lead generation. And then it's just like, oh, lead nurture is just, you know,
Hmm.
giving them some love, giving some contact. And so I felt that just take off the edge in such a way and felt joyful. So your point of where do you find joy?
Hmm.
That was really interesting. And I have a question on the email list. So the 40 to 70% open rates, that's pretty
Hmm.
great. It's pretty awesome.
Thank
That's
you.
really awesome. And so technique question with your clients and yourself, something I've been thinking of is like a weekly newsletter of like pretty much every week. I do a mastermind topic and I do it on Tuesdays and then I do a Thursday subconscious topic. And there's like a theme of the week that arises. And so every week, it's like I'm creating this and distilling it for mastermind members. And then it's like soul, higher self is putting things through. That's what I feel like. And so it's just like
Mm.
what I've been doing lately is just like cutting off a little piece or breaking off a little piece. And that's, spread out. So it's like from the same stream. And
Hmm.
so it feels really leveraged, very simple, and just very aligned. And so the next piece would be like, oh, okay, how can I just do this in a weekly newsletter?
Mm-hmm.
Because one last thing before I turn it over to you is a weekly newsletter that I listen to or I read every week is the Gene Keys newsletter. They've got like I think they call it the Pulse or something. And so every week there's the Gene Key of the week. There's a little write up, and then there's a SoundCloud audio, and it's fantastic. I love it. And so usually I'd be like, oh, that means I got to create something every week, but it's like I already am, and there's these different layers that it comes through. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, what is your thought on like a weekly newsletter that just gives a little dose? It's not like overwhelming people with information, just a little dose. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're thinking about creating these content pillars, right? Like things that you know are going to happen throughout your business on a weekly or monthly basis, because some people don't want to do weekly. And by the way, that's fine if you don't. The first thing I would do is poll your audience, ask them what they want.
Of course.
So
Brilliant.
send them an email and say, I'm thinking about one, two, three, or four option, A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
Which one do you like the best? Hit reply. Tell me A, B, C, or D, right? And then you know that you're delivering on what the majority wants. Um, so that would be my first thing that I would do if I was going to do a weekly newsletter. I don't do them, but a lot of my clients do, and it is such a value give
Mm,
to offer to people. My nurture and sales emails, my whole goal is to give them value and education, whether or not I'm selling something. So I'm kind of doing it in my own version of it. But
mm,
because I teach sales, people are always going to read my sales emails looking for the value and education in the way that I sell. So I get
mm.
away with selling a lot more than most people do.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So, but if you're going to have that as a pillar of a way that you give value, that is so important. The biggest value add that I do rather than doing it, and I just want to mention this for people to think about because I want them to see that there's different flavors of doing this. So a weekly email is amazing, and people will definitely stick around just for that.
Mhm.
Some of my clients who offer a weekly email, they will ask people, do you want to get this? Do you want to receive a weekly email from me? Yes or no, and segment them. If you want to get fancy with it, you could do that and give them the option to opt in or out of it as well after you pull them. And then for me, once a year, I do a no charge copy course. It's my biggest event of the year. People can apply to be a part of it. It's the thing that I cannot, like me personally, I cannot shut up about it. I will talk about it everywhere because it's such a value give. I give away a trip to Palm Springs to one winner who participates in it. So it's the one time of the year where I can't stop myself. Like I want to go everywhere on social and talk about it. I want to tell people what's happening inside of it. We've had 7,000 people go through it. It is so fun. So I know that I have energy for that once a year where I'm just like showing up everywhere, doing all the things. My emails the rest of the year. So that kind of runs from December to February and a little bit through March too. So I know what's happening for those 4 months. The other 6 months, I don't do a weekly email to give value because I know I'm giving so much value those 4 months of the year that that's enough for me. I
Yeah.
can't keep showing up outside of that. I love writing my emails. I never go a single month without sending at least one email, but my cadence is not what a lot of people teach, just a heads up.
Hmm.
But that works for my business and I don't have any problems like, continuing to convert and get people to participate in my stuff because that one time a year I give so much.
Mm.
So I want people to think about that. Like what would get you excited? Would you rather condense your value that you give, or do you want to have it appear on a weekly basis? I love that you're taking smaller pieces of a bigger thing. I do think newsletters are typically like the biggest problem I see with them is that they're overstacked with information.
Mm.
It's
Hmm.
like overwhelming to me. And maybe that's how I consume content. And some people want everything in a newsletter. I don't love them. So I like if you're keeping them shorter and like actionable and exciting in that way. I
Mhm.
think one of my favorite weekly emails that I used to read was Tut, the Notes from the Universe.
Yeah.
It's literally one sentence or two sentences.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So just keep in mind that, like, get a temperature check with your audience, see what they're most excited about, focus on that, and even ask them, like, how much content do they want? Occasionally, I send out like one sentence emails and people love those. I don't do them all the time, but they love them.
Wow. Wow.
So,
That's literally what I was thinking about this morning. I was just like, what if I just did post to just like a sentence or two? Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So interesting note. So speaking of open rates, and a person might be thinking, how in the heck are you getting these 40 to 70% open rates? You have a free gift for everybody here, and we're going to still continue on the podcast, but just if somebody was chomping at the bit for your free gift, you have a free gift on increasing people's open rates, right? Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I have three emails that you can copy, paste, and personalize. It's called the triple email open rates. And if you, yeah, it's fun. If you go to sagepolaris.com/Sebastian rocks, because he does, you'll be able to grab those. And if you've had a list for a while, it's a great way to scrub your list. So you'll send these three emails, and then if people haven't opened anything from you in the last 90 days, you can actually remove those unengaged subscribers. You're paying for them to basically squat on your list because they're not engaging with anything. So that's really good for people who've had an email list for a while. If you are just like you've ghosted your list, you stop talking to them, it happens to the best of us, but this will allow you to reappear in their inbox, and you'll be able to get ready to make your next offer because it helps you do a little market research to see what it is people want from you.
Wow. I feel like that's fantastic. And the ghosting your list, or just, maybe you got excited, maybe you did launch something, maybe you did have something, but then things went quiet. That's so cool that you have something that can solve that.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us, especially these last few years. People have had to step back and come back in. And it's like, don't write them and say, I'm sorry, I've been gone. Instead, use these emails.
Nice. Oh, that's super awesome. I'm gonna get those myself.
Yay.
Yeah.
Love it.
Okay. Well, fantastic. So let's see here. What we'll do as we start rounding the bend here is, if you have, in terms of techniques, so we really went on the inner journey and started moving into techniques as well. If there's anything that you feel inspired to share, whether it's a case study of a client or a case study of your own. I feel like case studies are the fastest for us to learn, because then it's just like, oh, it's a real person. So on this topic of launches and it being aligned with your mission, your calling, and also understanding that we're all human beings. So we got to test things out in the Wild West to figure out, what's going to work. Are there any techniques that come to mind that feel exciting to share in a case study format?
Yeah, for sure. I see so many cool things happening out there. So, I was working with a client who wanted to put out a new group program, and they were trying to figure out how to get people excited to take the first sampler of it to come into the bigger community that they wanted to
Hmm.
launch. So what I was seeing working for their audience, so keep in mind this client, one of their biggest strengths is showing up live and teaching. So we're
Hmm.
like, okay, how can we leverage this without overwhelming people who are somewhat new to them? Because we always assess before we do a launch. We're very conscious of the fact of how much of the audience knows them really well and is like warm and hot, and how much of that audience is cold and new to them. So we had a lot of more cold, new to them people coming into the audience. So we said, great, let's offer, we know you're great live, like when people learn from you virtually over a live, that you always do really well. So we did a 2-day live intensive where they only had to commit to showing up for 2 days to learn. We gave people plenty of time to decide so they could make room on their calendar. We made sure not to do it during a time when people are taking a lot of vacations. And once they came into that 2 day live intensive, we credited what they paid towards the 2 day intensive towards the bigger group program.
Mm,
And that worked really well. So I feel like for people here who have masterminds, it would be very obvious for them if that's one of their strengths is to show up and teach live. We made recordings available. We gave them time to watch the recording. But at the end of the 2 days, we said, hey, you can credit what you paid in this intensive towards our next bigger group program. And people got really excited about that and they filled their program.
mm, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, it reminds me of a technique I've heard before, essentially called the like money that's burning a hole in your pocket. It's like if you got credited or you got a gift that applies to something, it's like, oh, you want to pull it out and you want to use it.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. So yeah, and it got people really excited. But they felt more also there's like to me a safety mechanism in there that they feel safe about crediting that money because they've experienced it already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So psychologically, I think it helps people it kind of removes the barrier of like, do I really want to do something big with this person if I don't know any like enough about them yet? So that was really powerful too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Experience the difference. Yeah, before they invest.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So powerful. And yeah, I'm excited for people to go check out the link because I feel like this is just scratching the surface of the knowledge that you have with launches. And there's so many nuances, I believe. And then it's like, what's the style for the person? Like you shared, that person was good live in person. So it's like, how can we use their zone of genius rather than trying to fit them into a box that doesn't have their name on it? And
Love that.
so, yeah, I feel like you probably have stories and stories of these case studies.
Yeah, and also the last thing I'll say is like if you're trying to figure out what your personal strengths are, I recommend asking other people because there's a phrase that my friend Meryl says, which is you can't read the label from inside the bottle.
Hmm.
So having someone else like ask your inner circle, what am I great at? Tell me so that I can leverage that in my marketing. I think that's a great place to start is to let people reflect it back to you because sometimes it's really hard to see it for yourself.
Right. Absolutely. Asking others. And that just brought in my mind something else that you shared that I really loved and I started laughing at because it's so true is you mentioned polling the
Mhm.
people. And so I feel like this connected too. So instead of us overthinking and getting in our brains, what are my strengths? What am I good at? What are all these things? Just like, oh, go ask the people around you. And then, like you had mentioned too, like instead of for the newsletter, instead of me, I feel like getting so lost in my head of what about this? What about this? Why don't we just ask the people? And I laugh because that is something that comes up in my work all the time with mastermind leaders because it's like we're good at thinking and strategies and planning and all these things. And so many times the answer is just so simple right in front of us, which is ask the members,
Yeah.
all the members. It's like, oh, okay. It's not as hard as it doesn't need to be that hard, right? To figure it
Yeah.
all out on our own.
Yeah. And it's more fun that way because people feel invested in what you're creating.
Yeah,
So keep that in mind. They want to help you along the way.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay, so what we'll do now is a summary of the journey that we've gone on today. And then I'll pitch it over to you to have a closing thought, concept, idea for us. And before we do, I also have a free gift for everybody, which is a free soul contract report that mission driven coaches can get, which will help you get more aligned with your mission, launch your mastermind group, and ultimately do your calling here in the world.
Mm.
So that's at truefreedom.ai/free gift, truefreedom.ai/free gift. And now we'll jump into the summary. So, speaking of passion mission, one of the things that we started with is your passion for statistics and how in school that was a curiosity. And then boom, now in your work, where you're connecting with people, helping them with their mission, statistics is playing a key role.
Mhm.
And Sage shared with us that, there's different chapters of the launch type strategy and how a new style for launching that builds upon the things that work, but also, let go of the things that no longer worked in the market, i.e., fake timers. And really the connection behind the clicks, the connection behind the post, the connection behind the email, and really seeing social media, really seeing our branding, really seeing our launch as a spiritual tool for connecting with our true audience. And you shared about how you've gone unconventional to many of the tried and true practices, and it's worked for you, having a 45-day open card because you're traveling, you got kids, you got experiences to happen. So I really like that you're building your business around your zone of genius in your life
Mhm.
rather than giving everything away to the altar of business, that is designed in a certain way that like nobody wants to have. And really stepping into, okay, changes in the market, like things are heating up nationally, globally. So just being realization of, okay,
Mhm.
specificity, who can have the greatest impact? What's the focus of the offer? What are different flexible, payment plans that can still be fair and honorable to everybody? And maybe there's some creative solutions, and you'd mentioned different type of payment plans where they end up paying the same, just, broken up a little bit different. And really that phrase that you say to yourself every time that you post, and whenever that fear comes up of, are people going to not respond, or fear of negative comments, share the phrase of, let no come from other places than myself.
Mhm.
Let the no come from other places than myself. Love that. And you shared how your email list is so powerful for you, 40 to 70% open rates. Sometimes you just send a one sentence email and people love it. And people love it. And that's where you find your joy. And you mentioned, for people to look at, where do they find their joy? And so all of that coming together with the techniques of the case study, your free gift that you have as well. And I think that's going to bring us home for conscious launching of programs. What's a final note you'd like us to marinate on and end with today's podcast?
Yeah, I mean, the final piece that I want to share with everyone, and thank you for that beautiful recap, is that I feel that because I'm in Sebastian's community, that we all want to leave this world better than we found it. And just that alone is enough to like be yourself and to show up. It kind of already is bucking the system because there's so much out there that is easy to fall into in terms of doom scrolling and negative content. So I just want to thank everyone for doing something different and being a part of this change that we want to see, just by being yourself and showing up and wanting to make a positive impact. So I think it's really beautiful, that we have, and this is something that I remind myself of all the time, that we have the ability to do this. One generation before me could not reach people in the way that we can now. And often we think our reach is so small, but actually there was no reach before. So thank goodness that we are able to do that and to keep showing up and persevering. I know it's not always easy, but keep showing up because this is a gift we were given, our generation was given, and we can't squander it.
This is a gift we've been given and we can't squander it.
Mhm.
Wow, so powerful. That has been the podcast on this episode of Maximize Your Mastermind with Sage Polaris. Thanks, Sage, for being on the show.
Thank you, Sebastian, for having me.